growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, rap was almost inescapable. Its rise to popular status was during that time, and it was during this era that it really solidified its legacy and longevity. Because of this, as a kid, the music I was predominantly exposed to was hip-hop and rap. All of it started for me probably with Eminem, then 50 Cent, then quickly moving on to other artists. Rappers became a huge influence on culture as well. I remember getting into cannabis motivated by artists like Wiz Khalifa and Kid Cudi. And of course, the weed made me go deeper into the rap rabbit hole. Despite all this inspiration and lyricism, it took me a long while to stumble upon my favorite rapper of all time, Del the Funky Homosapien. I remember it fondly. It was 2010, I was living in a college dorm, and one day my friend came over to smoke, obviously. On his way through my dorm to the smoke room, he was blaring this incredible rap, to which I asked, "What the fuck is that, man?" And he quickly spit back the 4 words comprising his name before going on tangents about how amazing of an artist he was, like any good introduction would go. The song he was playing was No Need for Alarm, and just listening to how this legend flowed and rhymed was an absolute orgasm to my ears. This experience, and those like it, is also, for the most part, how Del established his fan base, classic word of mouth. From that minute forward, I knew Del was going to be a special artist in my life. By the time I got into him, a huge chunk of his current body of work was already released, and had already been circulating for years. It seems it just took those years to fall into my lap. Surprisingly, because Del's body of work is decently large. He's featured in movies, video games, and has had a ton of collaborations. Even though he can be an obscure rapper, his music makes a huge impact and his style and voice are incredibly unique, which really brings out his individuality. And in the rap game, that may be among the most important things to have and develop. By this time in 2022, Del the Funky Homosapien's career is vast, covers a lot of different territory, and has seen plenty of ups and downs. Allow me to dedicate this video to one of my greatest inspirations and favorite artists of all time with a storied history, Del the Funky Homosapien. Like all legends, it begins with a birth, and for Del, that was on August 12, 1972, in Oakland, California. You could say that skill and celebrity were in his veins, as he was the cousin of Ice Cube. Accordingly, young Del would find his career beginning with writing for Ice Cube's Delench Mob. Del has said multiple times that he got his stage name from just being tired of looking for a name to go by, so instead of losing his mind trying to settle on a pseudonym, he took his middle name and, being a smartass, decided to add the Funky Homosapien. Not much else is publicly known about Del's formative years. However, it's clear that he fell in love with funk music and, of course, hip-hop. Furthermore, he has gone on record and raps about being in rap battles as a youngin'. This battling is what helped him generate a local reputation. Del has a vast array of influences too, from punk to Indian music, jazz, and of course, funk. All of these various influences are seen in Del's lyrics, style, and his personality. Because of his reputation for being a cleaner and smart artist, it wasn't long before his cousin Ice Cube would take note and recognize that Del had real talent for hip-hop and rap. After finding his first success writing for his cousin, Del would, with the help of Ice Cube, craft his debut album in 1991, I Wish My Brother George Was Here. For a debut album, this was definitely up there, although flawed in many ways. The epic wordsmith was only 18 years old when he released his premiere album. The highlight song of the album was, by a wide measure, Mistadobalina, and it was this song that would carry the album to commercial success. Honestly, I don't really like the song, but I can see and understand its mainstream pull. I find most of the songs forgetful, not because of the man on the mic, but more so the production and quality. Del, in fact, is of course the shining factor of this album. The man just has an amazing flow on every song, and talk about charisma. The Funky Homosapien just radiates presence. Most songs on this album also present some kind of story, and Del really exposes how good of a storyteller he is, and in many ways, this was foreshadowing the path his career would eventually take. Standout tracks include obviously Mistadobalina, The Wacky World of Rapid Transit, and Dark Skinned Girls.
Simple as it sounds, is as simple as it ought to be. Light-skinned girls like the dark-skinned quality.
Del even explains more about his stage name.
Hey, yo, Dad.
What?
The fuck is a funky homosapien?
It's a human being, fool. A funky human being.
Alright.
While a moderate commercial success, outside of Mistadobalina, the album would have little to no impact on the mainstream of hip-hop. Even though this was a successful release, Del himself has said a number of times that he was not impressed with the album and the direction that it took. He felt he could have experimented more, and whether or not the album is your thing, it's a huge thing when the career of a legend is launched, and I Wish My Brother George Was Here did that very thing. After the moderate success and exposure of I Wish My Brother George Was Here, Del would begin his sophomore production by severing his creative relationship with Ice Cube to go into the studio and record an album of his own. Working under Elektra as a label, Del would continue to record and produce music which would culminate in the release of 1993's No Need for Alarm. 2 years after his debut, Del emphatically knocks it out of the park on his sophomore release. Kicking off the madness with You're in Shambles, Del seems like a completely reinvented man. Every aspect of his craft has improved dramatically. The music and the beats are excellent. Del's lyricism really shines and, once again, carries the entire production. Drawing from all sorts of influences like jazz and funk, Del really crafted delicious and poignant beats. If it's not already obvious, I love this album. Not that this was even the legend's peak, but there's something about this album being the way it is, how unique and impactful it is. Of course, being the very first Del album I was introduced to plays some part in my feelings toward No Need for Alarm. But even when distancing yourself a bit, this album is objectively a banger. During this part of Del's career, he would also form a hip-hop collective called Hieroglyphics, which included Casual, Pep Love, Domino, DJ Tour, and the members of Souls of Mischief, a group now widely known for their beautiful song 93 Till Infinity. A few members of this collective would also be featured on this album, further exposing the world to the sheer awesomeness of the group. Now, Hieroglyphics wouldn't release an album altogether until 5 years later, but this is where the collective had their roots. There were so many highlight tracks on this album to me, and it really is hard to pick just a few. So in no particular order, I'll leave it at 5. Those tracks are You're in Shambles, the opening track.
I'm the monster, coming in closer. I want ya. I not never worry about competition. Listen, I can twist men into pretzels. My jet skills can't outrun, cause it's fun. I'm not done.
Catch a Bad One.
Or you'll be needing medical attention when I leave you bleeding. Throw a monkey wrench in your program, crammed up your ass, and it's just too bad, son. Catch a bad one.
No Need for Alarm.
I wait to see your skull vibrate. When I bury the hatchet, I hope you catch it. I'll attach it to his focus. When I broke his head in half, feel the wrath on my behalf. I drop math and English, leave you squeamish. Then I squish you, wish you all fucking dream.
Thank Yous.
Has me boosting my confidence. Now I will stomp some sense into those dumb skulls. I leave them dumb. I thank you, the listener, cause if it was up to me, if y'all is girls, I'll be kidding.
And Worldwide.
Beginners. I slammed and I pinned you. Send you to the hospital, I got the flow. No nigga dare step, you'll get your hair swept off the floor when I clip ya, button your lip ya. Even if the record skips, I still rip.
It's said that Del was going for a more grittier production this time around, while still maintaining his clean style. I'd say he accomplished this in spades, resulting in one of my top Sir Diesel albums ever. It's easy listening too, the music is just easily fitting of some background tunes, yet at the same time, to the keen, there is a lot to pick apart on every track. From the samples to the lyrics, everything works together to really deliver some fresh air to popular rap music. Although the album saw success, it was comparable to I Wish. In my opinion, this is definitely the more superior album in every way. There's just so much substance on every track, and Del really seems in his element when you listen to every track. There's a lot to dissect on this one, far too much for this video, but just know how incredible this album is. Don't believe me? You have to check it out for yourself if you're a hip-hop head. To me, No Need for Alarm is the true first Del album, and everything about it exemplifies Del's style, and every track is a true bump. After No Need for Alarm invaded the world's earholes, and Del proved himself to potentially reach epic status, the fans wouldn't see a new album for 5 years. This was mostly due to his work with other Hieroglyphics members and their solo albums, but eventually in '98, Del would end up following up his legendary No Need for Alarm. The next masterpiece, Future Development, represented a great change in Del's career. His label Elektra would drop him in '97 after being disappointed at his third LP, which according to Folktales was the greatest Del album ever produced. This deviation was no matter to the big guy though, as Future Development would continue to broaden the catalog of amazing Del the Funky Homosapien music. The name of the album does a solid job at foretelling what kind of music to expect. Every beat is more futuristic and very much musically not what one would expect. This, among other things, is what made this album really hit home for me. It's classic Del. In fact, it's the legend beginning to enter his prime. It was the first album entirely produced by Del, and it really shows as each track is almost perfectly matching to the man's style, flow, and voice. The Funky Homosapien barely breathes, it seems, as he spits some of his most intricate raps ever. After a listen, it's real clear how much work was put into crafting this one, and given the 5-year album cycle, it certainly delivers on the weight. While this great album may not be as favored to me as its predecessor, there is still so much love for this release. Future Development, like No Need for Alarm, has numerous bangers, but a few that stand out to me are Stress the World,
Cause the price is very steep for those who sleep. I pile my rounds by the heat or cassettes, LPs, CDs at 12 inches. Perform the shit and get the girl like pinches.
Don't forget the bass,
Listen to rock the bells, you can barely hear the vocals. Mixing is important, getting the public into chokeholds. Hip hop hopefuls will do well to know this. It ain't about who's the dopest, it's who gets the fans to focus.
Faulty,
Del infuriated, lost it. I drew the line, he crossed it. It's time to burn his ass like I was caustic. I was screaming, beaming. This lady came out her apartment and said, "Bounce if you're here to start shit, little boy."
Corner Story, and Del's Nightmare. These select few do a great job at defining the album, Del's style, and path in his career. In many ways, the futurism aspect of the album would be foreshadowing where Del's career would take him. The storytelling on this album is impeccable, and songs like Faulty and Corner Story detail stories while making some statements about Del's personal life, and like all good stories, deliver some sort of cohesive message. Faulty's memo is that people were going to try to fuck you over constantly in life. Corner Story explains, well, the chorus says it all. The album is a consolidation of Del's clean style mixed with some futuristic beats, and it was a match made in heaven. The very same year fans would get Future Development, Hieroglyphics, Del's rap collective, would also drop their debut album, Third Eye Vision. If you thought the features of No Need for Alarm were great, then this album will blow your mind. Every single member is just off the charts. They all have unique styles, while they all employ cleaner modes. Standouts are definitely Opio, Casual, and Festo. Not to say they're better than the others, there's just something about how they use the mic that really stands out to me. Once again, Del proves his utter talent all over the album, only this time he gives plenty of time for his homies to shine. The album, in my opinion, is a lot more spotty than his previous work, but there are some iconic songs in this album for sure. Tracks like At the Helm come quick with interesting accompanying music and a deeper message within the song.
My rhymes is like dropping your head on cement, cracking it open, hoping to make a dent. I'm hell bent on resurrection, perfection. Lesson number 1, rekindle the essence. Rap ain't about busting caps and fucking bitches. It's about fluency with rhyme and ingenuity.
Others, like Oakland Blackouts, go back to Del's roots within the battle rap scene, and he slangs insane disses along with his powerhouse talent buddy, Opio.
MCs must be on autopilot, waddle silent like some platypuses. Del is down with data pushes with top secret floppy disk and battle armor and mecha. Plus all the rhymes that are beckon or double decker to check ya.
Then in the opening single, You Never Knew, really introduces the album perfectly to every member, and it actually has among the most highest plays out of all their music.
Del, been rhyming for more than a decade. On to the next stage while MCs need aid. Stay paid, I'm still great. Hey, none of that tomfoolery. As you can see, this shit ain't nothing new to me. Utterly hovering over other things material. You stuck in the here and now. Plus you're sweating profusely. Here's a towel.
Overall, the album is really good and definitely a better debut than I Wish. Moving on from Future Development and Third Eye Vision, Del would take the next 2 years following 1998 to produce his next album. Many were wondering where Del the Funky Homosapien would take his sound and career. Undoubtedly, Del would double down on the futuristic and experimentation, and out of this, the year 2000's Both Sides of the Brain was born. This album, like No Need for Alarm, remains among my favorite pieces of Del's work. There's so many cool futuristic sounds in the mix, and like Future Development, seems to be written only for Del and his voice or personality. This album would also establish a loose concept within itself that is about literally both sides of Del's brain. On one hand, you have his serious side where he goes more in depth about his thoughts and personal life, comments on various issues facing society, and confronts various stereotypes and cliches. On the other side of things, you have of course Del's funny and experimental side, where he again shows off his talent in battle rapping, and even has a weed song where he raps about the good old cannabis in Amsterdam.
Now we back in Amsterdam, got some grams for me. Chocolate tie, purple haze, and blocks of hash to make the days last for days. Rolling them so fat, circumference stuffed with major chronic. We can put a wager on it.
This album takes a lot of twists and turns, but remains cohesive the whole ride. It's actually kind of a trip. Del further exemplifies himself as a gifted storyteller with tracks like Superfiend, which tells the story of a homeless crack addict who seemingly gets superpowers upon his smoking of his delicious substance.
He got the master keys, more crack to seize. In the crack cave where they got a factory. Superfiend is skinny, can slide through small areas for quick getaways while fall to a pull to Derringer.
Del also consistently delivers messages to his audience throughout the album, whether it be about drunk driving or personal hygiene. The album can be dark at times, and it's totally a cynical view of the world. Despite this, it can be really fun too, especially with songs like Proto Culture, where both Del and Casual go in depth about their passion for video games. And being a lifelong gamer, this track really stands out for me.
I remember Ninja got it, finished it finally with Ramon. Wouldn't answer the phone, this was before getting blown. I own the first Nintendo Power with the maps of Zelda, help me conquer in an hour.
Both Sides of the Brain really delivers on its promise of more Del. Listeners get so many different sounds, and for all intents and purposes, the album again breathes fresh air into the genre it hails from. Following the success of Both Sides of the Brain, Del the Funky Homosapien would deliver that same year another collaborative effort, only not with Hieroglyphics. In a play straight out of left field that not a single fan saw coming, Del teamed up with fellow legends Dan the Automator and Kid Koala to release a concrete concept album named Deltron 3030. Once again, Del doubles down on the futurism in his lyrics, and Dan the Automator brings just as much sci-fi to every mix to tell a well thought out piece of fiction. Given that Del was already down the path of a futuristic sound, this album just capitalizes on all of that, and because of it too, Del feels like he's in his pure element. The language and rhymes that he employs paints a serene picture of the conceptual world in which the story takes place. The story casts Del as and follows a young rapper in the year 3030 named Deltron Zero. He is a reformed mech soldier who didn't respect orders and is now rebelling against the 31st century's equivalent of the New World Order. There's oligarchs that rule over and govern over humanity and shield them from their heritage, including art like hip-hop. Deltron Z eventually goes on to rap battle various enemies, which further showcases the Funky Homosapien's skills at battling. After defeating all of his foes, he becomes the Galactic Rhyme Federation champion. The story at first glance is definitely strange and maybe even a little cheesy, but to anyone who's listened, and I promise you if you haven't, that the team makes it seem reasonable and in fact awesome. The album is essentially a rap opera, and it's one of the few of its kind. The tracks cover all sorts of topics from serious social commentary to humor and of course epic sci-fi rap battles. This is all backed up by Dan's amazing, if not legendary mixes, setting the tone on every track for the master on the mic. Every single track on this album is a banger. There seriously is not a single bad song. Like any concept album worth its salt, everything works together to deliver a top-tier piece of art. The tracklist is segmented between many songs with various skits and narrations that help further push the narrative of Deltron 3030. Some are strictly story related, and others add some brevity to the mix, looking to get a laugh out of the audience. This is easily the best Del album ever released and worked on. Some standout tracks for me would be Mastermind, Positive Contact, and Love Story. That's not saying much in this case though, because like I said, every track is incredible. Deltron 3030 would unfortunately be the last we saw of the legend at his absolute peak. I guess, like most people, there's highs and lows. After all, it was like the dude was going Super Saiyan on Deltron 3030, and as everyone knows, there's a cooldown period after that kind of move. Anyway, it would be another 8 years until audiences saw another solo album from Del. In the meantime, fans would have to be satisfied with various collaborations and features that Del had had in the interim. Some of these features were forgetful, but some are amazing and even iconic in one case. Among the collabs of this period in Del's career was the 2005 project with the Wu-Tang Clan, Wu-Tang Meets the Indie Culture, and on this was Preservation with Aesop Rock. This was actually the first song that introduced me to fellow legend Aesop. This song is pretty good. It fuses 3 rap gods and adds a loose connection to one of them, the Wu-Tang Clan. Both Del and Aesop go very hard, exemplifying either one of their unique styles, like they were the only ones to do it. Before this collab, in 2001, Del would find himself featuring on 2 big songs for no one other than the Gorillaz, a now popular virtual band run by Damon Albarn, who featured on Deltron 3030. The 2 songs Sir Diesel featured on were Rock the House and, of course, the now iconic Clint Eastwood. The former was a simple rap beat with the legend going in on it, but the latter, well, that song is God mode. It was a surprise even to Del that he'd been on the debut album, as he was called to fill in for another artist whose lines were already recorded, but for some reason, Albarn wanted Del. He may have been the obvious choice given their working past and of course Del's skill. But either way, Del delivered an incredible performance in Clint Eastwood that would go on to drive the song to stardom and count itself among the top Gorillaz songs ever. During this interim period of the man's career, he would also find himself featured in other forms of media like video games, film, soundtracks, and even skateboarding and snowboarding videos. Positive Contact was featured in Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX, and If You Must was featured in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Positive Contact was again featured in a Tony Hawk game, this time being Underground in 2003. The Hieroglyphics crew even saw representation in video games with ESPN NBA 2K5, where their song Soweto was featured on, and they are also unlockable as a bonus team. And finally, Del's song Burn and At the Helm were featured in Tony Hawk's American Wasteland and Tony Hawk's Project 8 as well. After these collabs and features, in 2008, Del would go on to release his 5th studio album, 11th Hour. This is where the real fall of Del the Funky Homosapien begins. This album is pretty much entirely forgetful. There's something about it that's just missing that he even had in I Wish. It's funky for sure, but he failed to really work on the sound that he had already established himself as. I'm sure Del enjoyed being able to experiment again and really have fun with it, but the album wouldn't be able to see the kind of success his previous 3 or 4 albums did. It was the longest album cycle he had in his career, and this time it didn't pay off, and the album would flop. It was quiet for another few years, but leading up to 2013, it was clear that the boys were at it again, leaking subtle hints about Deltron Part 2 being in the works. Then, in 2013, Deltron 3030 Event 2 would be released. Like the album before it, the project came as a surprise, as most believed the first one to be a one and done. But as it turns out, we got another 16-song concept album continuing the pursuits of Deltron Z in intergalactic space. The album was again pretty good, but was nowhere near the debut of Deltron 3030. The album has a feature on damn near every song, and some have some big names on them like Zach de la Rocha. Like 11th Hour, something seemed to be missing from Del's performance. It's not bad, but it just wasn't the same, and it affects the overall feel of the album. Dan the Automator, on the other hand, comes in hard as always, and every mix is once again a banger filled with depth and interesting sounds. If people thought the first album was to be the last, then I think without a doubt this was the true end of Deltron. As the years rolled on, Del would release forgetful LP after forgetful LP, but would constantly find himself featured in video games and even one time, in true Del fashion, had another collaboration that came out of nowhere. This was a project with Cartoon Network for Craig of the Creek on an episode called The Kid from 3030. The episode is incredibly surprising, and Del dropped another bombshell with 3 new short songs written specifically for the episode. The legend played the episode's titular character, and even for a kids show, it wasn't too bad. It seemed that at this point in his career, Del was finding more success with his crossovers and collaborations than with his solo projects. Del would release his latest solo LP in 2014 called Iller Than Most, which was just another mid-tier performance in my opinion. No solo project after Both Sides of the Brain would have the same kind of impact as it. Del would find himself unable to recapture the magic he had in his prime. This was until Gate 13 came out in 2018. While not a solo album per se, he teamed up with producer Amp Live to create another perfect collaboration. The album is a serious step up for Del's career, and after a long time of not being able to seize the power he had earlier, he came back with a heavy hitter. The album is no Deltron 3030, or Both Sides of the Brain, but it's really solid. Del's performances are leagues better than what we've seen in over a decade, and Amp Live's mixes are once again tailor-made for the Funky Homosapien. The beats are fun and interesting, and Del's lyrics and rhymes are dope. Gate 13 really reminded me about why I fell in love with Del's art in the first place, and it was such a welcome addition to his career. Most recently in 2021, Del released another collaborative album, Subatomic. This time around, he teamed up with Funk Pumpin' and Kool Keith. This album is pretty alternative, it's incredibly experimental, and I would consider it avant-garde rap. It's not a bad piece of work, but it will only resonate with big Del stans. It's a hard listen, not because it's bad, but because it's very different. A lot of songs border this weird space between rapping and spoken word, and the timing is all off the charts. The album is no Gate 13, but it's nice to know that Del is still hard at work with his craft and art. Del the Funky Homosapien has proved over a long career that he is one of the best rappers to have ever walked the earth. With a rocky debut but an explosive rise to the top, Del exhibits a rapping style and lyrical prowess like no other in the game. His first couple of albums were a breath of fresh air for the industry, and his natural ability to collaborate with other artists and form groups became a cornerstone of his career. From Hieroglyphics to Deltron 3030, the Funky Homosapien would constantly be showing off his personality and charisma, while exhibiting his professional status on the microphone. While after the year 2000, Del's career would go through various highs and lows, he still consistently put out content for fans to enjoy, even if it wasn't as good as what they were accustomed to expect from the artist. Let's also not forget that his career isn't over yet. The man still puts out work to this day that thankfully is good art too. Del's work with other artists may be the most well-known pieces of work in his catalog, but often due to the nature of these collaborations, Del not only holds his own, but carries the performances. Outside of Hieroglyphics, it usually consists of producers who work with Del to tailor-make music for the artists involved, like Deltron 3030, a perfect fusion of legendary artists making music that is made only for them to perform. Del's features in other works of art, like video games, have also helped him broaden his impact and influence. Because of all these collaborations too, the catalog of Del music is incredibly vast, and if you get tired of just listening to Del, you can get more of him in a different, maybe more refreshing context. Overall, there is a metric fuck ton of Del content to jam to, and the man continues to bless eardrums with his beautiful music as time goes on. There's absolutely no doubt that Del the Funky Homosapien is among the most talented rappers of all time. Throughout his career, he's remained incredibly enigmatic, often making moves that most fans and audiences never expect. The man comes out of left field every time just to blow your mind. For whatever reason, the legend never completely broke to the mainstream, but is highly respected within the art form and will no doubt continue to influence rappers for years to come, hopefully being recorded into the annals of rap history. Thank you for watching once again. This was a long one, and it was totally deserved. Del is personally my favorite rapper, and it's an absolute pleasure to do a deep dive on him. Let me know about your feelings on Del the Funky Homosapien down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one. As always, take care.